Most people around the state of Texas know 12 Mighty Orphans as one of the most iconic books about high school football in the state of Texas, written by Jim Dent. It is now going to be a major motion picture released in Texas on June 11th and released nationwide June 18th. And here to talk about it is the director of the film, Ty Roberts. Ty, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for
And
having me.
absolutely, and one of the stars of the movie, we are joined by the coach himself, Rusty Russell. We're joined by actor Luke Wilson. Luke, how are you?
I'm great, Greg. Thank you for having us on.
Absolutely, Ty. I want to start with you. You're a Midland guy. You're from here in the state of Texas. I'm interested in what drew you to this project, making 12 Mighty Orphans into a feature film.
Yeah, growing up in West Texas, it's certainly ingrained, in a young man's upbringing. So it was definitely at the forefront of, football. And I did play football as a youngster and a few years into high school. But, really, I love this story so much. And Rusty Russell, to me, was a figure that I hadn't seen in a coach's role really before. And in a sports film, you're always looking for something that helps it sort of stand aside and rise above some of the great films that have been made already. But Rusty, man, I mean, he is such an incredible guy, and his wife Juanita, they were so ahead of their time in many, many ways. That kind of drew me in really honestly early on. And of course the orphans and the powerful sort of story of the Masonic Home Orphanage and all the kids that they affected during their 16 or so years at the Masonic Home in Fort Worth. And I love a good true story, and you don't really have to dress this one up to make it great. And it had all the workings of a great sports story. At the same time, it had a really interesting and unique perspective to me that kind of came outside of the football and sports perspective of it. It touches upon the Great Depression and just the difficulties that these kids faced at that time in America.
Luke, you play the coach Rusty Russell, who takes over the Mighty Mites there at Fort Worth Masonic Home, and this is I think this is a really interesting role because not only is it a period piece, it take place in the Great Depression, but you're also playing a football coach, which to my knowledge is not a role that you've played before. So how do you prepare for a role like this, like you're playing Rusty Russell in this movie?
Well, I mean, I've always been, I have friends who'll make fun of me for not knowing like the specifics of, where a team stands in the NFC East and, what draft pick went when. And, I'm always kind of into these personal interest stories. And I've always been interested in coaches and, read a lot of coaches' biographies just kind of for fun over the years. There was a great one by John Feinstein about a season with Bobby Knight called A Season on the Brink. And then, there's a great book out right now called I Came as a Shadow about John Thompson. And I just think that coaching's such an interesting job. I mean, you've got people that are like, Bobby Knight, who's just kind of over the top and kind of a maniac at times. And then you compare him to somebody like John Wooden, who's just kind of, seems like a philosophy professor almost. And how with, you can have those two different approaches, but still, Bobby Knight won national championships and John Wooden won national championships. And, they each had completely different approaches. And so for me, playing somebody like Rusty Russell, I think a lot of it, I would think about him having been in World War I and having lost his brother in battle. And, this was a time when, men weren't out there sharing their feelings and PTSD didn't even exist. But I think he'd already kind of, in a lot of respects, he'd already kind of been to hell and back. And so I kind of saw him as kind of a gentle guy. And also had spent a lot of time with his grandson, Russ, who was on set a lot. And so I think I couldn't help but, play Rusty in a way that, I was influenced by talking to Russ about his grandfather, Coach Russell, who did seem like just a very decent guy who, he left a football program in a school in Tyler, Texas that would have been a lot more prestigious, and then moved with his wife and, young child to an orphanage in Fort Worth, at the tail end of the Depression. So I think, yeah, he was just kind of a extraordinary guy, and he went about it in a very kind of quiet, dignified way.
Ty, you're also, aside from being the director of this film, you're also one of the co-writers of this screenplay, obviously based on the book by Jim Dent, which is legendary across the state of Texas. In watching the film, I was really struck. I probably don't need to tell folks, it's one of my favorite books. I was struck by how faithful the movie is to the book. And that's always strikes me as very difficult to find that balance between being faithful to the book, but also making sure it translates to the screen. How important was that for you to make it faithful to the book, and also how challenging was it for you?
It was extremely challenging. The book spans a few different seasons and combines, the stories of a number of different characters. I mean, it hones down to our 12 guys. But we had to take it for what it was, and we're making a 2-hour feature film. And so we had to take a few, liberties and whatnot in order to make the story work in a 2-hour picture. But at the essence of all the, I've done a few, stories and films that are based on characters and based on true stories. And it's really important to honor the spirit of it to me. At the same time, it's a fine line because you've got to tell the best story you can, because, at the end of the day, it's our livelihood, and we got to get out there and get people in the box in the seats and sell box office tickets and make this film the best it can be. So it's a balance beam in both worlds. It's extremely important, and I feel like between Luke being a Dallas native who played football, who favors that more philosophical side of coaching, I think, as did Rusty. We fit so many truths to the story that I feel like the things that we did have to sort of kind of cram in and make work, I think they're totally in the spirit of the film and the story. And it's so hard to do. And we just, Lane Garrison and I, my co-writer, we sat in an 8x12 room for probably 6-8 months trying to make this thing work. And we started out with multiple seasons, and we just chipped at it, and finally got it down to where it is today. And it's funny, you can't work backwards because we spend so much time trying to make it work other ways. But yeah, it's a challenge for sure, but I feel really, really good about it. And I feel like we preserved Rusty's sort of honor and the spirit of the home and a lot of these main characters. And Jim Dent, of course, who did a great job with the book and was really my big inspiration,
Luke, you're the lead in the movie, but you're far from the only star here. Robert Duvall, Martin Sheen, Wayne Knight. It's a star-studded cast. I know you've had a long career in acting, but what was the experience like for you working with a cast like this?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the most exciting part of for me, having been an actor, is when I've gotten the chance to work with those people I grew up loving watching on the big screen, and people that my dad was a fan of, and like I've gotten to work with Gene Hackman and Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges. So when you get to work with people like that, it's just kind of it's already exciting enough to be on a set, but when you get to work with somebody that you're an actual fan of, and then you find out that they're not just great actors, but great people, it makes it really exciting. And yeah, the chance to get to be around Martin Sheen, I, like Ty, had, there are those movies that are so important to us, like Badlands and Apocalypse Now. And then you find out that he's just an incredible person, because, when we were doing this movie, you've got the orphans. So you got 12 or 14 boys, and then me and Martin, and we're shooting outside. So you got to get everything. You've got 50, 16 guys in a scene, and you're trying to shoot outside before the sun goes down. So, we're moving around and moving fast, and Martin just had the best attitude, and you could tell how much he loved the boys and how much they loved him. And yeah, I think he just kind of had a spirit that that really inspired everybody. Because when sometimes it's like you picture those people that are kind of always like about the age of 50 or 55 like Martin, but he is older, and so you want to just make sure that he's comfortable, and we're not moving too fast, and that sometimes those actors that are from a different era, they have a different way of working, or they like to stick to the script. But Martin, he was up for new ideas that Ty would have, or that I would have, or that the boys would have, and he was just so great to work with. And I mean, I kidded around with him one day saying, because I knew Martin had all boys, and I said that my dad, I said to Martin that, I know that me and my brothers drove my dad crazy. How did he like being a father to boys? And Martin said his only regret is that he didn't have 4 more boys. So he was just a great person to be around, and also just, so talented and such a collaborator.
Ty, one of the things that is, whenever I watch football movies, I think sometimes it can be really hard to capture football action that feels authentic. And in watching this film, it felt authentic. That was one thing that watching the football scenes, I was like, oh, this looks like they're actually playing football. It's not just a bunch of actors running around. How do you go about making sure that these football scenes, which obviously are so integral to the narrative of the story, to making sure they feel real?
Yeah, it's hugely important, as you've noted. I mean, interestingly, in 1938, 9, it was a slightly different style, and on the way you line up, and how you position your body, and how you run even. Like, everything was really erect and upright, and like kind of a properness to it that, you see in the old clips. And it was a style, and it's just the way that things happened, and the way the plays were run. Excuse me. And so we had a historical football consultant, TJ Stroop, on set with us during the football shooting days, and he specializes in early American football, and he worked with the boys and Lane Garrison and their team to run these plays, and to get into the right stances and positions, and how to run it properly, and how to give it almost an awkward look. In my opinion, some of the guys you see them running, they're like straight backed and head back, instead of today where it's head forward and like knocking into people. It was a style that was very, very unique. So we really just prepared for it as best we could, and tried to be as accurate historically as we could. And TJ did an awesome job with that. He did another film called Leatherheads. Mm-hmm. That was early American football as well as college football. But it's definitely, you got to run those plays. It takes a lot of time. Lane was helping coordinate it, who was my co-writer, and he really, really understood the plays, and he has a really strong background in football, and still plays and runs routes and things like that. So he was really on top of it. I got behind the camera and the screens and looked at it to make sure it looked good. So he was watching the technical side, and TJ, and I was sort of looking at it from a creative and believability standpoint. So it was a great, new process for me, but definitely pretty intense.
Yeah, I thought that it turned out really, really great. And in watching those scenes, I thought that they were very believable. And finally, Luke, I'm holding here. This is the 1989 edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football magazine. I'm going to flip just randomly to page 282 to the preview for Dallas St. Mark's. It's interesting here. They mentioned they're excited about Marwin Brown, about Ben Smith, Otis Jennings. Coach Jerry Reese is really excited. But then also back for 1989, Matt Shuford, Creighton Smith, and a gentleman named Luke Wilson. What can you tell me about Luke Wilson, star of Dallas St. Mark's?
Luke Wilson, that guy, he loved his teammates. He was a good wide receiver, good running back. He was not great, like Friday nights in between the band and the lights and the crowd. Sometimes he would need his fullback, Joey Newhoff or Marlon Brown, to explain exactly what was going to be happening on a given play. But no, that was actually a great team, and it's so funny to hear all those names because we had a great coach then by the name of Jerry Reese, who was also my track coach, but he was just a great guy and a really good person. And that was a really fun team. I think my senior year we were 8-2, and but yeah, enough like Marlon Brown. I always think about the blocks he laid out for me, where he was probably one of the best players on our team. He was one of our captains, and also just an incredible blocker, as well as being a great runner and receiver. And my blocking sometimes was, it was one of those things where Saturday mornings they'd replay the tape. I would take my best shot, but there were those blocks where I just completely missed a guy, and then it would be up to Marwin, to have to make a great juke to find some open field. But that's pretty funny. That I'm just glad I made the scouting report.
Hey, listen, you're famous now, so good for you, man.
Yeah, made it.
Good for you. It's Luke Wilson and Ty Roberts. The film is 12 Mighty Orphans. It's being released across Texas June 11th and released nationwide in theaters across America June 18th. Fellas, congratulations on a fantastic film, and thanks for your time today.
Greg, thanks a ton. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. Good talking to you.
There they are, Luke Wilson